Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stipanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most. Hey, and welcome to the Sober Living Story podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting here with Julie Kleinhans, and she is the founder of Reshape and Recover. She has been able to maintain an 85-pound weight loss since 2008, when she had gone to a retreat and she heard Bill W.'s story, which enticed her to move forward with a 12-step program to overcome food addiction. She since began her own program and has created a community and a 12-step program all her own that has helped people also overcome food addiction in their lives. Today, she sits here with us to share parts of her life and to help other people who are struggling with food addiction as well. We talk often on this podcast about how addiction goes hand in hand with other addictions and how at times putting down one, another can pop up. So if you can, Julie, I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome. And if you want to just start from the beginning and tell us a little bit about how you've gotten here, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you invited me here. It's great to be here. I really have been an overeater my whole life. My mom actually found me on top of the refrigerator when I was 2. That's where she kept some sweets. And I used to sneak up to the corner store, which I wasn't allowed to do because it meant crossing a busy street. And so I'd get in trouble for that because I was always caught. And I would look through the cupboards of neighbors' kitchens when I was babysitting their kids, looking for treats. I knew for a long time that I had an unusual desire for sweets, and much more so than my 2 sisters. We would go to my grandparents' house, and my grandma always baked cookies before we came, and I learned the art of taking the lid off the jar so that it didn't clink, and then leaving just enough cookies at the bottom so that my grandma didn't think that we ate them all. And I think my sisters maybe had a couple each, and it was me that ate the rest of them. And I knew it wasn't normal, which is why I was sneaking around and doing it. I put WD-40 on the hinges in the kitchen cupboard because that's where the cookies were. And I remember telling my doctor when I was in my 20s, I married young. I was about 21 years old and had my first child just short of 23 years old. But I remember telling my doctor that I thought I had a problem with food. And he's like, oh, you just need to lose a few pounds, maybe 15 pounds. Because I really wasn't very much overweight because I would diet and then binge and then diet and then binge. And so I was able to stay sort of almost normal weight until I started having kids and I had control over my own food. When my parents were controlling my food, it was easier to stay thin, although I had problems. Once I hit 10, schoolmates were calling me chubby. So it was something I've struggled with for a long time. And after my third child, I lost almost all of the weight. I went to Weight Watchers and I got down to just within a few pounds of my goal weight. I think I was 3 pounds away from my goal weight. And I asked the leader if I could just raise my goal weight because I couldn't lose any more weight. And she said, well, I guess, but I don't feel like you have control over your eating. And she was absolutely right, because again, I was dieting and then binging and then dieting and then binging because I could not, once I started eating sugar, I couldn't stop. And so it was a pattern for me throughout my whole life. And then after that, it was like I tried diets for a short period of time, but I just couldn't stop eating. And so I'm only 5'3.5" on a tall day. And I got up to about 220 pounds, which is way too much for somebody my height. At one point, I got a new job and therefore new health insurance and a new doctor. And that doctor told me, Julie, you need to lose weight. And I said, I know I need to lose weight. And I can lose weight, but I can't keep it off because I can't stop eating. And she suggested Overeaters Anonymous. Never heard of Overeaters Anonymous. But it does come from Alcoholics Anonymous. But it took me a while to go to my first meeting, and I hated it. I thought, these people are weird. They're just changing one obsession for another obsession. They're weighing and measuring their food, and they're talking about something called abstinence. It's like I didn't know for sure what that was, but I was pretty
Were they
sure I
talking
didn't.
about,
I didn't
was that
want that.
abstinence from sugar?
Yeah, and they're binge
Okay.
foods because everybody has their own binge foods. For some people, it's sugar. Some it's sugar and high fat foods. And
So
I
once you
think for
identify your binge food, the suggestion
yes,
is to completely abstain, just like as it would be from like alcohol for an alcoholic. Is that
exactly.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
And I thought, I really just needed to learn to eat in moderation. Because yeah, that had worked so well, right? No, that didn't work well for me. But I was still in the mindset that that's what I needed to do, was to learn to eat in moderation. And so I was able to lose some weight. But I really wasn't convinced that I was a true addict until I went to a retreat and somebody read Bill W.'s story and talked about it. And I had never read the big book because I've never had a problem with alcohol. And so I thought, that's different. It's completely different and doesn't affect me at all. But once I heard his story and, how he at one point had sworn off alcohol, actually several times throughout his drinking career, he swore it off and only to find himself drinking again. And I thought, wow, that is me with food. And
Wow, yeah.
that's when I finally got it.
Yes, and that's all about the progression, isn't it? That story.
It
So you could
is.
just kind of see how wow, yeah, okay.
And it
So
was
that
getting
resonated with you.
worse and worse and worse. So the more, I would lose weight, and then the next time I would just gain more because I would just go hog wild till I realized and accepted that I was addicted to some foods. Not all food. I will never be one to overeat broccoli. I love broccoli. I really like it, but I'm just not going to overeat it.
Right. Okay.
It's the sugar and high fat foods that are addictive. And actually, there's even scientific studies now that show that sugar triggers parts of your brain just like heroin does. And they can actually see different parts of the brain light up, the pleasure centers light up. And so it really is exactly the same as Alcoholics Anonymous, as an alcoholic. And when you think about alcohol, it turns to sugar in your blood. So it makes sense
Yes. Mm-hmm.
that the addiction is so similar. Once I really accepted that, that's when I was able to say, you know what? I really do need to abstain. I can't do this in moderation. And so I really started working the steps. And I got to step 6 and I finished it, and my sponsor said she didn't think it was thorough enough, and that kind of threw me for a loop. And I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure how to go forward, and so I didn't. But I was able to stay abstinent from my binge foods. And then I was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2009.
Oh wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
it was a tumor that was wrapped around my left hearing nerve, and
Mm-hmm.
just is never cancerous, so they didn't even test for that, thankfully. But I'm a musician, so looking at possibly being deaf in
Mm-hmm.
one ear was difficult, but I never went back to the food.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I was looking at having surgery after 3 months after it was diagnosed. And I said, I really need to finish the steps. And
Mm-hmm.
so I worked with a friend who kept me accountable. And
Mm-hmm.
I got the steps done before the surgery. And I remained abstinent throughout that whole time. And people remarked about how calm I was, but I had truly
Really? Uh-huh.
found a peace, and I really was at peace with the whole thing. And even my one of my sons, my middle son, had asked me, "Mom, are you scared?" And I could honestly say, "No, I'm not scared." So I had the brain surgery, and I am deaf in my left ear, and I do still sing, and I play the bass and
Mm-hmm.
in a
Wow.
praise band at church.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoying that. And I had a little solo career for a while, as
Mm-hmm.
a guest singer at different churches, about 50 miles around my house. Just
Excellent.
was really blessed by the whole experience. And then in 2015, I lost my job. Um,
Okay.
there, it, there was um, the company I worked for was sold. They said I was overpaid, and honestly, they were right. I was making a lot of money for what I was doing. So they laid me off, and I loved that job, and it was really a
Mm.
heartbreak to lose that job.
Mm-hmm.
And then my husband at the time spent 20 grand behind my back in credit card debt. And
Okay.
this was the second time he had done that. So I was pretty angry. And he said, "Well, it takes two to have a marriage." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And it was probably about a month later, he filed for divorce. So I
Okay.
lost my
Wow.
job. I lost my husband. I lost my house. My kids were mad at me, because when he told me about the credit card debt, I walked. About a month later, I had said, you know, you need to work on your money problems, and we'll see if we can make this work. And he said
Uh-huh.
I filed for divorce. So I went through an awful lot that year. It was
Mm-hmm.
a terrible year for me, and I did not eat any of my binge foods. I was a guest speaker at um, a retreat center for food addiction. And I called her up and I said, "Oh, I'm scheduled to speak, and I just don't think I can do it because of what was going on in my life." And she said she encouraged me to come, and I
Mm-hmm.
did. I went and I gave my story, and it was really helpful, and to tell them that I was able to remain abstinent through the difficult times, because really to go back to the food is only going to make things worse.
That's really good for people to hear because I think that's one of the fears, like, well, when this happens, I'm surely going to drink again, or when this happens, I'm surely going to eat again, and we see time and time again that once people have been restored, you are really able to maintain, you're able to maintain your way. And it's a real testament to the fact that people can overcome and do life really beautifully.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie, I cried an awful lot that year. I asked God why. I was a member of a conservative Christian church that
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe in divorce, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why? Why would this be happening to me? But I dug deeper into God's word. So I went looking for a different church, and I was blessed by that. They really came alongside me and helped me. And by early 2016, I was feeling ready to maybe start dating again. I joined eHarmony, and I thought, it's just coffee. If I meet somebody, it's just coffee. I'm just getting my feet
Right.
wet, and
It's just coffee. I love that. Uh-huh.
yeah. So I was chatting online with this guy named Tony, and
Mm-hmm.
he said he wanted to meet me. And so I was like, oh gee, it's just coffee. It's just
Right.
coffee. So I met him for coffee and was head over heels in love with him right away. And
Wow.
we married
Wow.
five we married 5 months later. Yeah, so
Oh my
much for
goodness.
just coffee. It's been over 7 years, and he's been such a blessing to me.
Wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
we started Reshape and Recover together. Actually,
Okay.
he's been a coach and a counselor. He's a drug addiction counselor. And so he's very familiar with the 12 steps. I'm familiar with the 12 steps through my recovery.
Could you talk a little bit about Reshape and Recover and what you offer other people to help get to where you are today?
It's similar to any other 12-step program. I rewrote the 12 steps with food addiction in mind and from a Christian perspective. And I sent the 12 steps to Alcoholics Anonymous and got written
Mm-hmm.
permission to go
Wow.
ahead and use it with my program. So I'm very thankful for that.
Wow, that's
And
great. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I have an online community that I'm serving, and we just have a few members now, and it's growing. And so I'm excited to watch it grow. Um, and we're online at reshapeandrecover.com, and I have a Facebook page, and I'm on Pinterest. So, and on YouTube also, I have some videos out there, and I give people tips on food planning and a program that I've written using the 12 steps to help people to walk them through the 12 steps, which is, you know, the biggest part of the program, other than the community is so important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are there to support each other. And
Yes. Uh-huh.
when
I've been on your website and it's an excellent site and you have so much on there. And I listened to the accountability video. And, as you just said, community is really key in the success of not only getting better, but staying that way.
the 12th step is very important. And I do have a sponsor um, of my own that's not in my program. But I met her in Overeaters Anonymous, and I've been with her for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I have someone that I sponsor, and she's been with me for about 8 years. And
Oh,
so yeah, the hope is that, as people begin to recover, that they'll be able to help each other out as we grow. For now, it'll be a lot of help from me. I've got Saturday morning meetings right now that I'm offering. I want to be able to offer those for free. So
Okay.
how I've been doing it is, um, the first half hour, the meeting portion of it is mostly me and Tony with a script. We start with a prayer, and then we have a meeting script that we use,
Hmm.
and then a lesson. And after that portion of it, then it'll be a members only Q&A, and
Okay.
that they have the privacy that they need. Um, so, but I want to open it up to everyone, but we need to keep it private also. So that
Oh,
is
that's
why
good.
we've,
That's good for people to know in case they feel like they don't want to speak openly about it with someone on like a Facebook, an open Facebook group or something like that. Do you
right.
tend
And
to find that, because some people would be, is there, like the shame involved from overeating, or it's not
there's a
something that
lot of
everybody
shame.
talks about?
I don't know about the alcoholic, and I'm guessing there's probably shame, but it's a little easier to hide it maybe than, an overeater a lot of times wears it.
Right, right,
You look at somebody,
right.
and just because a person's overweight doesn't mean necessarily that they're an overeater. There can be other reasons for it. Um, but there is a lot of shame in the overeating, and a lot of times people do it secretly.
Mm-hmm.
And me sneaking cookies when I was a kid, I
Mm-hmm.
was ashamed even back then.
Why? Like, why do you go that deep into, like, why did you start to do that in the first place?
Hard to know the reason why. I mean, for me, I had two wonderful parents. No, they weren't
Mm-hmm.
perfect, but they were pretty close. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really have a good reason for it. Some people do. Some people have really hard childhoods that cause it. Because I'm a musician, I'm more sensitive than others. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. And perhaps there's something biological there. I'm not sure. I was adopted when I was 3 days old, so I don't really have family history.
Uh-huh.
But the adoption was never anything that I felt any embarrassment or sadness about,
Okay. Yeah.
because my adoptive parents were wonderful, and I just always knew I was adopted, and that they thought I was special, that I can think
Okay.
of.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I too have heard studies about sugar and how it lights up the brain, just like you had shared, equivalent to heroin, or, it's so addictive. And people downplay and say, well, not, it's in everything. Yes. And it's ketchup and this and that. But I love the fact of abstinence completely from what you had said from the binges. Because if I look at my own life, I have not had alcohol in more than 18 years. However, like when I think in this, like the current year, and with eating like sugars, and I can completely relate. Yes, highly susceptible to not being able to just have one of anything. And if it has sugar in it, that's 100 times more so the fact. So I had not ever thought, well, I'll completely abstain from whatever it is I identify as a binge food. But I really like that idea because I know that for my previous, it works. The fact that you've been able to do it for so long is really tremendous. And
Yeah, and on my website, I have a form that I make available to people for free, highlights the different categories of food. I call it my traffic light food guide list. And
okay.
it's a red column for red foods, which is danger, don't eat these. And then there's yellow, which, An example, well, we know an example of a red food for me would be cookies, brownies, cake, ice cream, um, and things that are high sugar. I do eat ketchup, and if it has sugar in it, I don't eat enough of the ketchup that it affects me. But
Okay.
in the yellow category, it's like things like popcorn. I can eat it if it's a controlled environment.
Hmm.
When I was working a job that had a popcorn maker, and on Fridays they'd get that thing fired up and making popcorn, and I knew that I could eat popcorn all day that day, and that would not
Uh-huh.
be a good thing for me. And so I committed to my sponsor that I was not going to eat popcorn at work because I knew if I
Okay.
started, I wouldn't be able to stop. But now, if I have something in a bag that I can put in my microwave and my husband and I share it, it's a controlled amount, and
Right.
that does not seem to be a problem for me. I don't have to go back and get more. So
So that traffic light, do you find that that works for most people? They identify with the red foods, they identify with the yellow, and they identify with the green.
I think so. I do think that it's a process, and
Mhm.
sometimes it takes a little bit of figuring out. It's like, well, I think this is a yellow food. And then you find out, nope, that is
Okay.
not a yellow food. That one's red. And
Okay. Right.
and it just is trial and error. I thought for sure ice cream was a yellow for a while. And then I had to have it every day. And then if there was candy in it, that was okay too. And it's
Right.
like, no, nope, I have to move that one over. So,
Okay. So you
um,
kind of can change it up and you can personalize it to yourself.
oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I'm going to have to look at that.
Some people can't eat sweeteners like sugar substitutes.
Wow,
Um,
really?
and for me, I remember I had banana bread once that had, I can't remember which sugar substitute it was, but I had a bite of that and I was like, "Oh boy, do I want more of this." And I knew that was not going to be something that I could eat.
That's really interesting because I know that if I say, hey, on Monday, I'm going to start a diet, I know that I have to have black coffee because if I start my morning off with a sweetener and a milk, whether it's coconut or almond, or then it just throws it off.
One thing that helps with the sugar cravings is to make sure you're getting enough protein
Right.
and
Okay. Makes
vegetables.
sense.
Um, because if your
Makes
body
sense.
truly is getting enough nutrients, you're not going to crave the sugar stuff as much.
Mhm.
And when you're
That's
first
great.
starting out, that craving is there kind of no matter what. But the further along you get, it does subside. Like now, I sometimes I'll bake cookies for a relative. My husband, he does not have this same thing with sugar that I do, so he can have a cookie and stop. I can't, but I can bake the cookies. Don't try any of it out,
Right.
and that kind of freedom I never thought I would have. And, sometimes I'll see my favorite desserts and I might think, oh, I used to love those, but I do not want to go back to the way I was. And so it's like poison to me, really.
Right. Yes,
And
exactly.
when you think about it, would you eat poison even if it tasted good and it wouldn't kill you for probably at least 20 years, right? Because it
Right.
it doesn't kill you right away, but it does
Right.
kill people. It kills people through diabetes, through heart
Hmm.
disease, cancer. I've talked to a couple of people who um, found out that I don't eat sugar, and they laughed and they say, well, I figure I may as well die happy because I'm going to die anyway. And it's like, yeah, but I wasn't happy.
Right,
I
but
didn't
you weren't
feel
happy.
good. I was ashamed of the way I looked and I was hurting. I couldn't walk at the zoo with my kids. I had to sit every now and then because my feet hurt so much because I was carrying so much extra weight. I had a couple of trips to the hospital for heart palpitations, and it's like, I don't want to live that way.
Mm.
So I wasn't happy, and I get what he was saying because I used to say the same thing. I don't need the sugar to be happy. I'm happy anyway. And a lot of that was obtained, or a good portion of that was obtained through completing the 12 steps and being able to learn how to deal with my emotions and the difficulties that everyone goes through. Rather than eating, I can look at the situation and do a quick fourth step and see my part in it. And if I need to do a ninth step amends, then I'll do that. And that has gotten so much easier. The fourth step, inventory, really made me see how a lot of my own problems were my own fault. And not all of them. Sometimes people have wronged me, and it's not my fault. But honestly, I think most people are just doing the best they can with what they have.
Sure.
And so you've heard hurt people hurt people.
Right. Yes.
And knowing that, can I forgive them and just let it go and just say, yeah, they didn't treat me right, but that's on them. That's not on me. That's not a reflection on me at all. I don't need to eat over that. Write down, what's bothering me. I don't use that tool as often as I could, but I tend to be more of a talker, I think, and a thinker. It works really well for a lot of people.
Yes.
So those 12 steps, I found so much healing through them. And then the continued healing through the 10th step, and then 11 with the meditation and the relationship with God. And then 12, telling people about it. And you have to be really careful when you tell people about overeating because they're very sensitive. It's like, what are you saying? I'm fat? But I am able to tell people because they're like, oh, here, have a dessert. And I just say, no, thank you. I don't eat sugar. And they're like, what? You don't eat sugar? That's so weird. Why don't you eat sugar? And I said, well, I've had my lifetime quota.
Right.
By the time, yeah, a long time ago, I had already reached my max. And I say I used to be very much overweight, and I just don't eat it anymore. And
Wow,
so
that's really
I'm able to
impressive.
share my story that way. And I
Very
still
good.
have consequences from being overweight. So like loose
You do.
skin and my arms just never got down to quite a normal size. And it's a reminder for me to never let myself get that way again.
Wow, that's excellent. I just think it's really inspiring to hear someone talk so openly about this. And I think that it's going to resonate with a lot of people because even if they're not doing one thing, they may pick up eating more and not be able to even identify that it is a problem until it is a problem, And I think what you had said about the sugar being really addictive is so true. And there are studies. And I love that you really emphasize the importance and the peace that the 12 steps brought because it sounds like it's an ongoing solution that you apply to your life that's brought you the most peace and has allowed you to stay this way. for so long and your relationship with God. And I think all of those parts are so important. And I find it really inspiring that you have put together your own community and your own version of the 12 steps with your husband. So I would encourage anyone who's listening, if they were to find that they thought they had a problem with overeating or food addiction, to visit reshapeandrecover.com to for the solution and join this community. To see, I also saw on your website you had recipe, like you had done a recipe or something, which I wouldn't have ever thought. It was apples and you sprinkled it with a cinnamon and baked it for 350. I mean, that's 2 ingredients. That's it. And, things like that, it's just so helpful, when you're trying to make a change, when you have somebody there that's willing to get on video and say, hey, welcome in. This is how I'm doing my life and it's working.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I would encourage anyone. It is, from a Christian perspective, but anyone is welcome. And I do have some recipes on there. I have a blog on the website, and
Oh, that's great.
it's duplicated on Facebook so that I can reach more people. And I have Recipe Wednesday. So on Wednesdays, I come up with a recipe, and I'm hoping I never run out, because I'm certainly not a fantastic cook or anything. My husband likes my cooking, but I only know how to make certain things. So I'm going to be looking to the community to help me out and
Oh, that's great.
submit some recipes.
Yes.
And then on Thursdays, I talk about weekend planning. And because a lot of it is just making sure that you've planned. If you can plan your weekend, you're less likely to binge. And so I eat out at restaurants and stuff, but I know where I'm going to go and what I'm going to eat before I go.
Okay.
And
So
so
you
that's
plan
really
ahead.
helpful. Yes, plan
Okay.
ahead. And I go to parties, and yeah, sometimes there's food, and I can either find out what the food is if I feel comfortable asking the hostess or host, or I can eat ahead of time and not eat when I get there. So it depends on the situation. And then I stay busy. I have hobbies that really helps. Um, and then on Saturdays, my blogs I call them the Saturday step. So then I just talk a little bit about a step. And then on Sundays, my husband and I do a very short devotion. It's just a Bible verse or two, and how it relates to food, and then a short prayer. And so that's Devotion Sunday. And then the other days are kind of free tips, whatever they might be.
So many great resources. Um, is there anything that you would say? Because I know we talked about the shame and embarrassment that this comes with. And so if somebody was listening and they wanted to reach out to you privately, how could they do that?
There's a comment section on my website, so you can send me an email that way. Through the Facebook page, you can send me a private message. So you can email me also at info@reshapeandrecover.com.
Wonderful. Great.
And I do respond to those personally. So, and
Wonderful.
there is so much shame, and this takes time. And it took me 2 years to become abstinent from my binge foods. And, I was still losing some weight, but it's hard when you're ashamed of what you look like, and you're ashamed of the overeating, and it's hard. And just knowing that God's grace covers it all, that we just need to be patient and continue working working the program and just take one day at a time. Just you wake up and say, today I'm going to be abstinent. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but today I'm going to be abstinent. And I think that can bring hope to people.
So grateful that you had the courage to come on and share your story and to share the hope and to offer your resources to everyone. So I appreciate that so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastipanovic.com.